So, which palace coup did we miss that absolutely belongs in this video? Do not give the polite answer. Name the ruler, name the betrayal, and argue like your family just lost a throne over breakfast. And if you enjoyed watching crowns change owners faster than royal soup, hit like, subscribe, and stay close before the guards switch sides again. 1. Catherine the Great's 1762 palace takeover in Russia began with the kind of marriage problem that usually requires a priest, not a cavalry regiment. Her husband Peter III was losing support so fast the throne probably felt slippery. Catherine put on a borrowed officer's uniform, rode into St. Petersburg, and convinced the guards that she looked much more imperial than the man playing with toy soldiers at another palace. Peter tried every royal escape hatch at once: share power, retire quietly, keep his violin, keep his dog, maybe pretend none of this was happening. Catherine took the empire with a horse, a bad-fitting coat, and the confidence of a woman who had already packed emotionally. 2. Caligula's fall in 41 AD turned the Praetorian Guard into Rome's most terrifying career counselors. The emperor had insulted Cassius Chaerea for his voice so often that the palace basically became a bad comedy stage with swords near the props. When the guards finally acted, Rome did not get a careful succession plan. It got Claudius, Caligula's uncle, reportedly discovered hiding behind a curtain and dragged into destiny. Claudius thought he was doomed and apologized, like a man who had accidentally stepped on a sacred goose. The guards saw a frightened uncle. Rome saw an emperor. The curtain had done more constitutional work than the Senate. 3. The Qianlong coup of 705 retired Zetian with the politeness of a knife hidden inside a silk pillow. China's only woman to officially rule as emperor was elderly, ill, and surrounded by court officials who had decided the Tang dynasty should come back before the palace got any more awkward. Ministers entered the palace, removed her favorite advisors from influence, and informed Wu that her reign was ending. This was bold, because telling Wu Zetian to stop ruling was like telling a dragon to try being a duck. Yet the coup worked. She abdicated, the Tang returned, and the court exhaled so loudly the ink probably dried faster. 4. Sultan Osman II's 1622 downfall began with one very dangerous idea: reform the Janissaries before the Janissaries reformed him. Osman was young, ambitious, and convinced he could tame an elite corps that had been frightening sultans longer than he had been alive. The Janissaries poured into Topkapi Palace, pulled his uncle Mustafa back onto the throne, and paraded Osman through the capital in humiliation. The absurd touch was the donkey. Osman owned fine horses, royal horses, horses that probably had better grooming than minor officials. Yet his sudden fall came with the saddest transport upgrade in Ottoman memory. 5. Denmark's 1772 palace coup against Struensee started after a masquerade ball, which is exactly how a royal disaster should begin if the court has any sense of theater. Johann Friedrich Struensee had gone from royal doctor to the man practically running Denmark, changing laws faster than courtiers could change wigs. Queen Dowager Juliana Maria and her allies decided the doctor had prescribed himself too much kingdom. In the early morning, guards moved through Christiansborg Palace. Doors opened, doors closed, and Struensee's power vanished before the candles finished sweating. Everyone had worn masks at the ball, but the real costume turned out to be authority. 6. Theophanos' 969 Byzantine coup had the dramatic elegance of a palace romance written by a raccoon with a lute. Emperor Nikephoros II ruled Constantinople, slept austerely, and trusted his palace security far too much. His wife, Theophano, favored the general John Tzimiskes, so one winter night she helped get John and his companions into the imperial wing through a window. A basket on a rope became the most suspicious transportation device in Byzantine history. By the time the palace understood the delivery, power had already changed hands. John got the crown, Theophano got pushed aside, and the window probably never felt innocent again. 7. Nader Shah's 1747 tent coup showed that even the greatest conqueror can become too exhausting for the people guarding his pillow. Nader had built an enormous empire and collected legendary treasure, but later rule brought suspicion, fury, and fear into his own camp. One night, his officers decided the empire could no longer orbit one man's temper. They entered his tent, ended his reign, and the empire he had stitched together began unraveling almost immediately. The peacock throne and other treasures went wandering through history like jewelry with commitment issues. Nadir had conquered cities, armies, and kings. He lost the room where he slept. 8. The Portuguese Restoration coup of 1640 was a palace switch so bold it sounded like a tavern dare. Portugal had been ruled by the Spanish Habsburgs for decades, and a group of nobles decided the arrangement had aged like fish in summer. They moved inside Lisbon's royal palace, removed the Spanish-backed leadership, and proclaimed the Duke of Braganza as King John IV. The whole kingdom suddenly remembered it preferred having its own crown, thank you very much. It was the kind of political flip where everyone pretended the decision had been obvious all along. One morning, Spain had Portugal. Then Portugal checked its pockets and took itself back. 9. Rome's 222 AD palace purge proved that the Praetorian Guard had a very strict limit on how much bizarre behavior they were willing to protect. The teenage emperor Elagabalus had spent 4 years turning the Roman palace into a chaotic mix of weird religious rituals, scandals, and practical jokes that included releasing wild animals at dinner parties. His grandmother, Julia Maesa, realized the guards were oiling their swords and looking annoyed. She orchestrated a coup from inside the family, shifting power to his younger, much more boring cousin, Severus Alexander. Elagabalus was removed with brutal efficiency, proving that in Rome, you could be a tyrant, but you could never be exhausting. 10. Japan's Ishii incident of 645 was a palace ceremony that turned into a political earthquake wearing formal robes. The Soga clan had become so powerful at court that imperial authority was starting to look decorative, like a fan no one was allowed to wave. Prince Naka no Oe and Nakatomi no Kamatari used a diplomatic ceremony as the stage for their move against Soga no Iruka. Palace gates were controlled, the court was stunned, and Empress Kogyoku soon abdicated. The result opened the way for the Taika reforms. Japan did not just change leaders, it took the whole court stew, kicked over the pot, and wrote a new recipe. 11. Tsar Paul I built Mikhailovsky Castle to be coup-proof, which is the kind of sentence history hears and immediately starts giggling. The place had moats, drawbridges, hidden corridors, and enough paranoia baked into the walls to make the candles nervous. Paul moved in during 1801, probably thinking no one could reach him unless they were a fish with a key. 40 days later, his own officers arrived through one of those very convenient concealed passages because someone had shared the floor plans. Paul tried to hide behind a fireplace screen, which is not exactly the pose of a mighty autocrat. The castle protected everything except the throne. 12. Baybars's 1260 rise after Coups was a Mamluk power swap, with rabbits wandering through the worst possible scene. Coups had just helped stop the Mongols at Ain Jalut, which should have earned him at least a peaceful ride home and a nice bowl of something warm. Instead, tension with his commander Baybars followed the army back through Syria. During a hunting stop, court politics pounced. By the time the dust settled, Coups was out and Baybars was on his way to becoming sultan. History could have picked a grander symbol than hares. It did not. The rabbit field kept the receipt. 13. The Tianshun Restoration of 1457 was Ming China's royal comeback staged like a midnight rescue of a very important teapot. Former Emperor Yingzong had been held in the southern palace for years after losing the throne to his brother. When the reigning Jingtai emperor became seriously ill, supporters of Yingzong gathered guards, forced open the palace gates, and carried him back toward power. He went from forgotten spare emperor to reigning emperor again in one wild night. Imagine sitting in quiet confinement, probably counting ceiling beams, and suddenly hundreds of men arrive saying, "Good news, your old job has found you." The Forbidden City loved plot twists. 14. Selim III's 1807. Ottoman coup was not really about pants, but history has handed us the pants and we must respect the gift. Selim's Nizami Shadid reforms tried to build a modernized army with new training, new organization, and European-style uniforms. The Janissaries saw not just fabric, but a threat wrapped around legs. Their uprising forced Salem from power and placed Mustafa IV on the throne. The real issue was military reform and political survival, but the visual was unbeatable. An empire arguing with trousers as if cloth had declared war. Sometimes history wears a serious face and ridiculous pants. 15. The Ruthven Raid of 1582 was Scotland solving a political disagreement by grabbing the teenage king and calling it governance. James VI was only 16, surrounded by factions, favorites, sermons, and nobles who treated royal influence like a pie they had not been served enough of. At Ruthven Castle, a group of nobles detained him and took control of his access, his council, and essentially his kingdom. James was still king, just in the same way a rooster is still in charge while being carried under someone's arm. The nobles said they were protecting him. History heard that and dropped its oatcake in disbelief. 16. Michael II's Christmas rise in 820 was Byzantine timing at its most absurd. Emperor Leo V had imprisoned Michael and planned punishment, but the holiday slowed things down just enough for Michael's supporters to act. During the Christmas service, palace loyalty flipped, Leo was removed, and Michael was brought out to be crowned while still reportedly wearing prison restraints. That is not a normal accessory for a coronation. Most emperors arrive with jewels, silk, and incense. Michael arrived looking like the palace had accidentally crowned a locked chest. Byzantium shrugged and continued, because apparently this was within the normal range of imperial weather. 17. Joshin's 1455 takeover by Grand Prince Suyang was an uncle-nephew disaster, with royal paperwork standing nearby looking guilty. Young King Dunjong sat on the throne, but his uncle had already gathered allies and crushed the ministers who protected the boy king. After 2 years of pressure, Suyang forced Dunjong to abdicate and became King Seijo. The official language probably sounded very respectful because courts love dressing a shove in silk. In plain terms, the uncle moved the nephew out of power and called it stability. Joseon got a capable ruler, but the palace family meal must have become unbearably quiet. 18. Siam's 1688 palace revolution at Laburi began when King Narai became ill, and the court started circling succession like hungry cats around a fish basket. Fitraka, commander of the royal elephants, understood that in Siam, elephant management was apparently excellent training for throne management. He took control of the palace, sidelined Narai's chosen circle, and positioned himself as the man who could protect tradition against foreign influence. Soon he was king. It was a coup with elephants in the background, which automatically makes every other coup look underdecorated. Some men arrive with cavalry. Fitracha brought the energy of a stable that knew where power lived. 19. Domitian's palace plot in 96 AD began with a fake bandage, which is a ridiculous object to defeat an emperor with. Stephanus, a freedman, walked around for days pretending his arm was injured while hiding his real intentions under linen. Domitian had polished stone surfaces installed so he could spot danger behind him. Yet somehow the suspicious bandage man kept passing inspection like a loaf of bread with eyebrows. When the plot unfolded, the Senate rushed to erase Domitian's name from public honors with the energy of scribes chasing a spilled ink pot. Rome did not just change rulers, it tried to scrub the old one off the walls. 20. Denmark's quiet coup of 1784 was less thunderstorm and more royal chess played by people pretending not to move pieces. Crown Prince Frederick was still young, but he and his supporters had watched the old palace faction rule through his unstable father, Christian VII, long enough. At a council meeting, Frederick secured the king's signature, took control of the government, and calmly pushed Queen Dowager Juliana Maria's circle away from power. No roaring mob, no flaming gates, no horse slipping on marble. Just a prince, a document, and a court realizing the boy at the table had brought a very serious spoon to the royal porridge. 21. The Xuanwu Gate incident of 626 was Tang China's most uncomfortable family meeting, held with weapons instead of tea. Li Shimin believed his brothers were pushing him out of the succession, so he moved first at the palace gate. The confrontation ended with Li Shimin controlling the future, his father Emperor Gaozu under serious pressure, and the Tang throne suddenly looking in only one direction. 2 months later, Gaozu abdicated, and Li Shimin became Emperor Taizong. The awkward part is that Taizong then became one of China's greatest rulers. History had to write, with visible discomfort, that the family disaster came with excellent administration. 22. Sultan Ibrahim's 1648 palace collapse was the moment Ottoman politics looked at a fur-covered court and said enough. Ibrahim's rule had become unstable, expensive, and famously strange, with stories of sable, mink, luxury, and palace habits so odd even the cushions must have whispered. Janissaries, religious authorities, and palace insiders rallied around his young son Mehmed. In one abrupt court shakeup, Ibrahim was removed and a 6-year-old became sultan. The child needed cushions to sit properly on the throne, which is a powerful image. The empire replaced a fur storm with a kindergarten crown, and somehow that felt like a plan. 23. Elizabeth Petrovna's Russian coup in 1741 was basically a royal sleepover that accidentally became a government. In the middle of the night, Peter the Great's daughter went to the Preobrazhensky guards wearing armor over her dress and asked the soldiers if they would rather serve her or keep obeying an infant emperor who probably had stronger opinions about blankets than policy. The guards chose the adult with the dramatic entrance. Elizabeth marched to the Winter Palace. The regency folded like wet pastry, and by morning Russia had a new empress. She walked into history like a woman returning to a room she had technically never left. 24. Empress Zoe's 1042 comeback in Constantinople was the laziest-looking miracle ever achieved by a furious city. Michael V had exiled his adoptive mother Zoe to a convent and shaved her head, assuming the people would simply nod and go buy onions. Constantinople did not nod. Constantinople became one giant, angry kettle. Crowds stormed through the city. The palace shook with panic, and Zoe was restored while still dressed like someone who had been interrupted between sleep and breakfast. She did not need armor, a speech, or a horse. She just returned, sat down, and made the empire look like it had apologized to the wrong aunt. 25. Nepal's Kot crisis of 1846 turned one palace gathering into the beginning of Rana dominance. Queen Rajya Lakshmi called nobles to the Kot courtyard after a shocking court emergency, expecting answers and loyalty. Instead, the meeting became a political thunderclap. Jung Bahadur Kunwar emerged as the strongest man in the palace, secured control, and soon built the Rana system that would dominate Nepal for generations. The strangest part is how fast the court changed shape. One evening, noble families arrived with rank, pride, and expectations. By the end, power had chosen a new house and told everyone else to stop touching the cushions. 26. The Praetorian auction of 193 AD was Rome forgetting that an empire should not be sold like a mule with a shiny saddle. After Pertinax lost the throne, the Praetorian Guard looked at the most powerful office in the world and thought, "Excellent, let us hold a bidding contest." Didius Julianus offered enough money to win the Guard's support, which made him emperor in the dumbest possible way. He did not inherit Rome, conquer Rome, or charm Rome. He bought Rome from soldiers behaving like market vendors with spears. The empire had many bad days, but this was the day the crown needed a responsible adult. 27. Mughal Emperor Farrukhsiyar lost power in 1719 because the Sayyid brothers had grown tired of being kingmakers without enjoying the full furniture arrangement. They had helped place him on the throne, but Farrukhsiyar tried to escape their influence and turned the Red Fort into a nest of plots, suspicion, and very tense hallway breathing. The Sayyids moved troops into Delhi, took control of the palace fortress, and replaced him with a more manageable prince. It was the Mughal version of a puppet show where the puppet suddenly grabs the strings, so the puppeteers calmly fetch another puppet. Elegant? No. Effective? Very. 28. Gustav III of Sweden turned a political crisis in 1772 into a royal stage performance with soldiers as background scenery. Sweden's parliament had been bossing kings around for decades, and Gustav decided he had spent enough time wearing a crown that worked like a decorative soup bowl. He secured the guards, locked down Stockholm, gathered the estates, and presented his new constitution with the calm smile of a man who had already arranged the chairs. The nobles realized the king had entered the room as a monarch and would leave as the owner of the room. Gustav did not need thunder. He brought paperwork wearing boots. 29. The Tanglong coup of 710 cleaned up the Tang court after Empress Wei tried to turn palace influence into her own private stew pot. Emperor Zhongzong was gone, and Wei's faction hoped to keep control through a young emperor and a very crowded web of relatives. Princess Taiping and Li Longji moved fast, rallying palace guards and knocking Wei's circle out of power before it could harden into a new regime. Li Longji's father was placed on the throne as Emperor Ruizong, while everyone pretended the court had not just been rearranged like cushions after a wrestling match. The Tang dynasty survived, but the furniture probably needed therapy. 30. Ahmed III's fall in 1730 came when the Patrona Halil revolt stormed Ottoman politics like a market brawl that found the palace gate open. The Tulip era had filled Istanbul with gardens, luxury, poetry, and elites enjoying themselves with dangerous confidence. Patrona Halil and his followers turned public anger into a palace crisis, demanding changes so loudly that the Sultan's world shrank by the hour. Ahmed abdicated, and Mahmud I took the throne. The tulips remained innocent, but the era named after them collapsed like a fancy dessert dropped on marble. Never let flowers be the mascot of political overconfidence. 31. Empress Irene's 797 takeover was a mother-son power struggle so tense, even the palace curtains probably requested transfer. Constantine VI had ruled with his mother and made enough enemies to fill a banquet hall with bad breathing. Irene gathered loyal supporters, seized control of the palace machinery, and removed her son from power inside the imperial world that had raised him. Then she did the truly shocking part. She ruled as emperor, not merely empress, because Byzantium had no comfortable little box for a woman holding the whole throne alone. Rome later used the confusion to crown Charlemagne. One family argument accidentally rearranged Europe. 32. Portugal's 1667 palace coup against Afonso VI was a family drama wearing a crown and limping through a hallway. Afonso was king, but his brother Pedro, the queen, and a very tired faction of nobles decided Portugal needed a ruler who could actually hold the reins without the horse feeling insulted. The court pressure built until Afonso handed over power, while Pedro became prince regent and the real operator of the kingdom. It was not a grand battlefield moment. It was more like the palace gently but firmly taking the royal chair away from one brother and sliding it under another. Portugal changed drivers without changing the carriage. 33. Nader's 1732 removal of Safavid Shah Tahmasp II was a court coup disguised as a national rescue mission. Tahmasp had lost prestige after a disastrous campaign, and Nader, already the real military force behind the throne, gathered nobles and clerics to declare the Shah unfit. Then he placed Tahmasp's baby son Abbas III on the throne, because nothing says stable government like replacing an adult with a child who can be outdebated by a plum. Nader became regent and held the actual power. Persia got a tiny monarch, a giant commander, and a court pretending this was all perfectly normal. 34. Ethiopia's 1916 court coup against Iyasu was a throne reversal wrapped in religious politics, noble pressure, and one very sharp succession pivot. Iyasu had never been crowned in the full traditional way, and his enemies used questions about loyalty, faith, and alliances to turn the elite against him. In Addis Ababa, leading nobles and church figures declared him deposed and raised Ziuditu as empress, with Ras Tafari becoming heir and regent. The court did not just swap a ruler. It changed the entire direction of the empire. Iyasu lost the crown before it had properly settled, like a hat rejected by its own feathers. 35. The Xinyu coup of 1861 made Empress Dowager Cixi a master of palace timing before most of her rivals understood the clock had hands. After the Xianfeng emperor died, 8 regents were supposed to guide the young Tongji emperor. Cixi, Empress Dowager Xian, and Prince Gong decided that sounded like 8 men standing between them and the steering rope. They used seals, edicts, alliances, and court choreography to strip the regents of authority as the imperial party returned toward Beijing. No need for a battlefield when a stamp can kick harder than a mule. Cixi did not seize a sword. She seized the process. 36. Alexios III's 1195 takeover of Byzantium happened while his brother Isaac II was away hunting, which proves that leaving the palace for fresh air can be politically dangerous. The army acclaimed Alexios, the court shifted, and Isaac returned to discover that his brother had not merely borrowed the house, but taken the empire. Alexios then had to buy loyalty with so much money that the treasury probably developed a cough. It was a coup with all the dignity of stealing a chair while the owner is chasing deer. Byzantium changed emperors, and somewhere in Thrace, a hunting party became the worst career advice in history. 37. The Edirne event of 1703 removed Sultan Mustafa II after the Ottoman court spent too much time away from Istanbul and too little time reading the room. Soldiers, scholars, and officials grew furious that power seemed trapped in Edirne while the capital simmered like a pot left near the fire. The revolt marched toward the center of authority, the palace faction buckled, and Mustafa abdicated in favor of Ahmed III. It was not one dramatic doorway so much as an entire government being pulled by the sleeve back to reality. The message was simple. When the capital gets angry, even a sultan should answer the bell. 38. The first strife of princes in 1398 turned the newborn Joseon dynasty into a royal nursery where the babies were fully grown and holding claims to power. King Taijo's sons argued over succession, influence, and who should get the best slice of the brand new kingdom. Yibangwan moved faster than his rivals, shattered the faction supporting his younger half-brother, and forced the court to recognize a new political reality. Taijo eventually stepped away, and the throne path changed. Joseon had barely finished hanging its first curtains before the princes started rearranging the palace. Nothing says fresh dynasty like immediate family chaos. 39. Romanos Lekapenos seized the Bucolian palace in 919 with the smooth confidence of a sailor docking his ship inside someone else's living room. Young Constantine VII was the legitimate emperor, but he was surrounded by regents, factions, and adults treating his throne like a chair at a crowded wedding. Romanos sailed into Constantinople, took control of the palace, married his daughter into the imperial family, and gradually climbed from commander to father-in-law to senior emperor. He did not snatch the crown like a hungry wolf. He walked around it in circles until the crown got dizzy and sat on his head. 40. Sweden's palace coup of 1809 removed Gustav IV Adolf with the energy of a court finally tired of watching a man argue with reality. The king had lost wars, allies, territory, and apparently the ability to read the mood of people holding swords in hallways. Officers entered the royal palace in Stockholm and placed him under control before his crown could ask for better management. Gustav tried to act majestic, but majesty is difficult when everyone around you is quietly deciding where to put the furniture after you leave. Sweden changed direction in a single palace day. The crown stayed. The wearer was politely discontinued. 41. The Wuxu coup of 1898 ended the 100 Days Reform, with Empress Dowager Cixi yanking the palace brake so hard the reform cart nearly lost its wheels. Guangxu Emperor had backed rapid changes that frightened conservative officials, confused old networks, and made the court feel as if someone had released bees into the ancestral temple. Cixi moved first, placed Guangxu under control, and took back practical power. The reforms scattered, the young emperor became a monarch with very little room to monarch, and the palace returned to older hands. It was not a debate ending. It was a door closing with imperial punctuation. 42. Alexios Doukas seized Constantinople in 1204, while the Fourth Crusade sat outside like a wolf pretending to be a weather problem. The young emperor Alexios IV had promised too much, paid too little, and irritated nearly everyone inside and outside the walls. Doukas, known as Murtzouphlos, used the chaos to take control of the palace and push himself onto the throne. It was less a coronation than a man grabbing the steering rope on a sinking cart. The city needed calm, supplies, and diplomacy. Instead, it got another Alexios, because Byzantium apparently ordered emperors in bulk and forgot to check the basket. 43. The 1909 removal of Abdul Hamid II closed one of the Ottoman Empire's strangest palace chapters with a delegation walking into Yildiz Palace like the final act of a very stern play. After the counter-coup crisis in Istanbul, the young Turk-aligned forces restored control, and the Sultan was formally deposed in favor of Mehmed V. Abdul Hamid had ruled with caution, spies, ceremony, and the instincts of a man who trusted curtains more than ministers. But this time, the palace walls could not keep the decision outside. The empire did not ask if he was ready, it simply arrived with the ending written. 44. The 1893 overthrow of the Hawaiian kingdom was a palace coup executed with the aggressive paperwork of a hostile corporate takeover. Queen Liliuokalani wanted to restore royal authority and give voting rights back to native Hawaiians. A group of American and European businessmen living in Honolulu looked at her new constitution and decided they strongly preferred their pineapples and profit margins exactly as they were. Backed by U.S. Marines who just happened to land for protection, a so-called Committee of Safety marched to the Iolani Palace and demanded she step down. The Queen yielded to avoid bloodshed, making it the only time a sovereign monarchy was overthrown by guys who essentially brought a business memo to a gunfight. So which palace coup did we miss that absolutely belongs in this video? Do not give the polite answer. Name the ruler, name the betrayal, and argue like your family just lost a throne over breakfast. And if you enjoyed watching crowns change owners faster than royal soup, hit like, subscribe, and stay close before the guards switch sides again.